Hello, my name's Ian Seeger from Pilot Career News. On the 6th and 7th of November, we held our very first virtual edition of Pilot Careers Live. We streamed over 30 different seminars with 60 speakers. There were 2 days packed full of great information. Of course, we recorded everything, and you're about to watch one of the videos from the event. Before you do, I just want to thank our sponsors, Bose, Alsim, Entro, and of course Pulis. Without them and without the exhibitors, it wouldn't be possible. The exhibitor pages are still live, so feel free to head on over there, go to www.pilotcareerslive.com and click through to the exhibitors. There's loads of information, loads of downloads, all sorts of great stuff there for you. Anyway, enjoy the video, and if you find it useful, really appreciate it if you click subscribe on our YouTube channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back. We are now moving into an area to discuss why we don't have many female pilots flying around the skies of the world at the moment. Before I introduce our guest panellists for this session, just to say once again thank you to all of our sponsors, to Bose, to Alsim, to Pulis and to Entrol for supporting the event. And a reminder that if you go shopping with Pulis and put PCL into the code system in your checkout, you'll get a 5% discount. Also a reminder that all the questions are being held to go into a Q&A panel at the end of each session of speakers. So our Q&A panel will not be at the end of this talk. We've got a couple more talks, and then the Q&A session will gather all the speakers that have spoken prior to that for us to answer the questions that you've been sending through. So we're not ignoring them. We will come to them when we do the Q&A panels later. So enough of that. Let's move on to introduce you to our next two speakers. In fact, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves because they know themselves better than I do, as I keep saying. But we have with us today, and we're delighted to have with us today, both Marnie Munns, who is a very experienced airline captain and has been well known for championing the female pilot cause, and also Jordina Lort from Barcelona Flight School. So, Marnie, can I come to you first just to do an introduction as to who you are, so that people know who they're chatting to?
Hello, very welcome. It's a delight to be here today, especially during these troubled times. My name's Marnie Munns. I'm an airline captain. I fly the 320 at the moment, and I have been in the industry for about 20 years, but been flying for about 26 years now. I got involved about 5 years ago after having been asked by my company to find out what the barriers were, why there weren't more women in flight operations. And it actually came about because I had a passenger in Switzerland who was extremely upset about the fact there were two female pilots at the controls of the aircraft. We had a chat with her. We were actually a really experienced crew. So I'd been doing the job about 15 years. My colleague had been doing the job about 10 years. So we had 25 years experience between us. We got her back safely to Luton, I'm glad to say. And it really made me think, actually, why don't more people know that actually there are lots of women who fly aircraft? And then I started to investigate the numbers. So my company asked me to get involved. And actually, I've been very lucky. I've been championing it ever since. And during this pandemic, especially, I've been heartened by the fact that actually female pilots has actually been a major topic for this pandemic, because all the work we've done over the last 5 years, there is a danger we could lose that if we do not keep this focus going with the last in, first out, which are quite old-fashioned policies for airlines, and I don't blame them for adopting that. There is a danger we could undo all the amazing work we've done, not just with women, but also with other underrepresented groups in aviation. So I'm here to champion the cause.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Marnie. Thank you very much indeed. And Jordina, lovely to have you here with us today. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jordina, and well, I don't have all the experience as Marnie has, but well, in my case, I started flying a long time, well, about 8 years ago, but as a cabin crew. Because when I started flying, I didn't know I actually had the opportunity to become a pilot. I always loved all this aviation industry and everything related to, well, airplanes, the sky, etc. But I didn't know it was something meant for me. So I started doing or flying as a cabin crew. And then once or twice a month, I realized, well, I had the pleasure to fly with a female pilot. And it was nothing very usual. But, well, I started thinking when pondering about it, and I thought, okay, if she can be here and she's flying the aircraft today, why can't I be there in her position? So, well, I started looking for some information. I started, I went into the school. I asked for, what would be necessary to start the course. So, well, the more information I got, the more interested I was in it. And, well, I started saving a lot, and then I started the course. And I think it's the most, the great experience ever. And I think, one of the most beautiful things, it's, this industry, is if you get into it and you like it, it's impossible to get out of it. So, I remember when we started, when I started in the school, we were 3 girls in the class. And then I end up being alone because we can start at 3-4 different times. And, every time I see a new girl in the school, I don't know, I go to her, I like to talk to her, encourage her. And I think, it's important to keep going and to encourage every girl and every woman who likes or maybe thinks that it would be a very nice opportunity to her to just try.
No, agreed. Both of you are obviously extremely passionate about it. So why do you think it is that we don't have enough female pilots flying? Why is it not happening? Marnie, what do you think?
Well, I think traditionally, if you look back across history, we did actually have quite a good, if you go back really a long time ago to the glory days of aviation in the 1930s, we did actually have a lot of women pioneers who really started the aviation bug going and were really passionate about it, which is, that passion hasn't changed over 115 years. But after the war, we had this downturn of, once again, that men were encouraged to come back from the war and take up jobs. Women were asked to return from flying duties, which they did during the war through the ATA, back into more domestic roles. And really, if you look at the statistics, we haven't really recovered from that since we haven't done anything since the 1960s. Then we had a small spike where people started to get into the airlines, and actually we had our first commercial pilots in the 70s and 80s. And then really nothing has changed since those days until about 5 or 6 years ago, when actually airlines started to realise. We had our first CEO who was a female CEO of the airlines. She questioned what on earth is going on, and really the pioneering sort of spirit came back to it from then. So in terms of barriers, I think there's been it's been hidden for all these years, and then now we're afraid to do positive action to make changes to encourage women to come in. And then there are other barriers like financial barriers, and I think we need to do a lot more work in exploring how we can help all pilots, new pilots, with their financial barriers, but especially minority groups like women who notoriously do not want to take on debt. They have a risk averse to taking on debt, and I don't blame them. Now is the time to be being risk averse. But I really think that there is not the encouragement that there would have been for perhaps other groups who are pilots. And it's very hard. If you don't know what goes on in the flight deck, then it's very hard to say, well, I'll fit in there. I can have a family. I can do everything that a woman does. In fact, the role of a female pilot, especially in the commercial industry, is you get part-time options in most airlines, flexible working. You don't lose I didn't lose my command just because I have 2 children and I went part-time. In fact, nobody at work knows that I'm a part-time captain. I go to work, I do my job, I come home. Now, all of these factors, if I worked in the city in a high-power job, I wouldn't have that. But as a woman in aviation, I do. And I think that that's something that we really have to open the eyes up to all those people out there. And that applies for men as well. They can get a work-life balance. And this pandemic has had some very strange effects with regards to part-time working and where we're going in the future. And I think actually women have a very strong voice in driving that change and actually making it a positive change for everybody.
There's some really valuable points in there. And interestingly, just as you were chatting then, Marnie, one of the questions that's come through links quite nicely to what you've just said. And it's a question from Zoe, and she says, why do you think there's still such a stigma surrounding female pilots? Female lawyers and doctors are much more accepted by society nowadays. So where does the stigma come from, do you think? Jordina, I'm going to ask you that question for the moment, if I may.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of a cliche, right? Maybe a cliche, we haven't talked about it enough, because as you said, yeah, in other professions, the fact that a woman occupies this position is not a fact, or it's not an issue anymore. But since when we talk about aviation, it's very normal to think about a pilot and being a man. So in my case, for example, when every time I say, or I meet someone and they ask me about what do I do, and I tell them, well, I'm a pilot, they always ask me, pilot about what, do you drive cars? Or, I mean, they don't think about this possibility. And I think because we haven't talked about it enough, or we haven't, I don't know, given the opportunity, to show all this potential that women have in this industry as well.
Okay, there's a bit of a theme coming here. It's something that you said early on, Marnie, as well, about the flight that you did, and the female passenger had a concern about it being an all-female crew, and not. You said something about people not being aware that can happen, which is just an anathema to me. But you're also saying, Jordina, that people don't know who's we, who has the responsibility to try and get this message outside to the outside world about the fact that women can be pilots just as much as men. Marnie?
I think actually, bizarrely, it's in the industry already who are there, and I have seen some amazing support that my colleagues and I have been offering to our female colleagues in the industry who are coming in, who are already in the industry. And I have to say that the positives of this pandemic, and there are not that many, I'll be honest, but there are some really strong positives, is that I have never been so connected to female colleagues across the industry, and it really shows how important it is actually, and that includes all my colleagues. Pilots are notoriously not communicative outside work, because we go to work, we're really good at communicating at work, and then we tend to go home. We don't work in an office environment. In fact, we don't even look at emails. So this pandemic has actually given us an opportunity to really come together, and I think because of that, in terms of women, I'm very much in contact with my colleagues, and it's about supporting. I would be the first, if any pilots who want to be pilots contact me, I will always be really honest about what I think is going on in the industry. And even now, I don't think you should rule out aviation at all, but I think you should be really clever about your timing and your funding and your preparation for it. And what I've seen a lot of my pilot friends do, or colleagues do, is diversify at this time and not be afraid to do that. And I think if you set yourself up really well before you start this career, you will have a very successful career, and you'll be more resilient to the ups and downs that this career can actually offer you, or subject you to. And so I think that, and the female groups have been extremely resilient. And watch this space, you'll see a lot of research coming out, hopefully, where a lot of my colleagues have gone off and done masters while they're working part-time. And I think that's a real testament to, let's get this industry right for the next generation. So it's women, I think, need to promote it, but men also need to promote it.
Yes.
A lot of my colleagues know the benefits of having a balanced flight deck, a balanced company, and different points of view. And it's those colleagues who need to step up and speak out. Even if it sounds strange, you're allowed to take positive action to make a difference. Discrimination is not the issue, it's positive action.
Yeah, thank you. And interestingly, a couple of questions have come through here. I mean, this panel session is specifically about female pilots, but the whole discussion about diversity and minorities being encouraged into the industry links to it. And we've had a question from Josh, so thank you, Josh, for joining in on this session, and also Chloe. They're both very, very similar questions, which say, I'm going to read Josh's out just as an example. Where do we go from here to get minorities into the field? Women, ethnic minorities, financially limited. And Chloe's question is also, how do women overcome the financial issues and worries they face when thinking about training to be a pilot? Jordina, would you like to say anything about that on the financial side of things in particular?
Yeah, well, I'm really aware of that, because I had to pay everything for myself. So I think, I really know that it's very expensive and very difficult to save up all this amount of money. But I also know that if you want to do it, you will find the means. You can ask for help, you can ask for a loan, you can work. In my case, for example, I was working in an airplane, so it encouraged me even more to keep saving and to keep fighting for finally reaching the goal, or the final goal that I had in my mind. So yes, it would be super nice, and I would really like to participate in any event or any kind of group, not to find or a way, not to see how could we manage this, especially for people who don't have the facilities to reach this position, because it's not studying a regular degree in the university, which it's very.
There have been some initiatives by some airlines and some ATOs to encourage more females in, and there've been some grant initiatives and things like that. I mean, there's always the debate: why would you give a grant initiative to a female pilot and not a male pilot? So we need to consider that, as Marnie quite rightly said. There is a balance to be had here. But Marnie, you mentioned the financial side of things earlier. Would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, so the initiatives on the outside looked like they were offering just female pilots. Actually, inside they were offering them to men as well. And that's one of the things, is just because we call a scheme or a scheme is called after a female's name, interestingly enough, what it did is attracted women, because it seemed to be more that that resonates with me. Whereas actually I said to all my male contacts who wanted to be pilots, no, apply. And they did, and they got in under the same scheme. So it's not, you need to just be careful about, all of this is about face value, isn't it? That we say, why do women not, why is there a stigma attached to women being pilots? Because you can't see them. And why don't we know more about what the job involves? Well, you can't see what we do. We're not allowed to show you. We have to sit behind a bulletproof door. But what I can say is that there are charities out there. So if you're a young person, you're thinking about becoming into the industry now, just keep that passion. You don't have to have a university degree. You need the passion, you need the ability, and you need the drive to do it. So I don't dispute that. And that's what made me realise in this pandemic is getting stronger. But just be patient and go and find these charities who offer work experience, so you get a real feel for what is available, and they are out there. And I think these sorts of things we need to encourage more and more in the industry. We need to really educate people about how can you join, when can you join, and really there are lots of different routes to take. Don't be put off by it's a lump sum. Think about the modular route now. The airlines are starting to open up for modular routes, and it's really important that you perhaps don't expose yourself to huge amounts of debts at this time. So there's lots of different ways we can do this. And I think it's really important that you look around. But don't also judge. Look at the schools who look after their people in a pandemic. That's what I will say. Talk to the students who are at the schools and really get feedback from them, and you will get a feel for who looks after you. And
that's the whole message through this event over these last 2 days, is go and ask the questions, do your research really, really thoroughly, whatever your personal particular desire is, your personal background is, whatever it might be. It is a very personal decision at the end of the day. You mentioned a couple of charities. Are you aware of any charities across Europe, Georgina, that would specifically help females into aviation or diversity groups?
I was looking into these EasyJet female pilots grant. Well, they were helping like female pilots, because they wanted to increase their numbers in female pilots, and they were offering.
Sorry to interrupt, but I'm talking more specifically about charities. Are you aware of any charities that will help, or societies?
Not at the moment, no.
So, Marnie, do you have some in mind?
Yeah, there's I think it's Fly to Help. Is that the one you've got, Karen?
I'm aware of Fly to Help, yeah.
Fly to Help. So they're a charity for young people. The great thing about it is you have to apply to get a scholarship. It's a week's work experience. We've helped with them before by providing pilots to go and talk to the group of people. I'm glad to say that I think one person did take up and became a pilot from that group, so I was really pleased about that. But at the end of the day, these charities instructors will be around. Flying, look at gliding clubs. You just need to get a feel for aviation. You need to get in and hear what's going on. Go visit a local sim centre if you know there are dotted around. There's a lot more fixed base sims. Go and have a go in one and just see. But I think those that haven't started yet and are between the ages of 18 and 24, you've got 4 years. You've got plenty of time. Please don't rush into this. Those that are already halfway through their training, find the least risk route to finish your training perhaps and get those licenses sealed in. But then go away and make sure you make yourself robust, get your savings back up and that sort of thing, and then come into the industry, do the last bit if you can as the industry picks up, because that's really important. The airlines will be looking at who is most current.
I think just there, you said you've got 4 years. I think you've got more than 4 years. You can start training quite a lot later in life nowadays. So, a snapshot there. Yeah. So, a couple of questions that have come for the panel. The first one is no name given. Is it common that both first officer and captain on the flight deck are women?
Yes.
Yes. Well, not common enough, I think, is the answer, and that's the whole point of this discussion. We need more female pilots. Currently, there's only 6% pilots in the world who are female.
More focused on in certain companies. So certain companies have a very high proportion of women.
Yeah.
Companies don't. I'm glad to say that there is still very much an emphasis on airlines recognising that they do actually want to have that balance in their workforce.
Yeah.
So that's still a focus even during the pandemic.
Yeah. So Pernia has asked the question, have companies and airlines made more strides to hire women? And I think the answer to that is yes, but we're always encouraging them to do even more on that. Jasmine, do women get discriminated against for being a woman when they start in a training school? Georgina, would you like to answer from your experience on that one?
No, I don't really suffer from any discrimination. On the contrary, since we are the minority, we get integrated super well. I mean, there is nothing to worry about it. It's on the contrary, we can give our point of view. We can motivate other girls to join. Boys can also ask us, how do we live in this environment or in this area? So I felt no discrimination at all. On the contrary, I felt super integrated since the very first moment. So this is not an issue at all.
Okay, thank you. And Jasmine has asked another question. Do women need to be more prepared than men when applying to flight school? Marnie, what would your response be to that, please?
I think that answers itself, actually. I think women don't need to be more prepared. They just generally are more prepared. And that is just the psyche that women tend to have. Well, as an airline pilot, I think that's a very good psyche to have, to turn up to work really prepared. So there's nothing wrong with that. You don't need to be more prepared. Anyone who turns up to a flying school to do an interview needs to be really prepared, and don't underestimate how competitive it is, but also don't underestimate, the fact that you can actually get in. So preparation is key, passion is key, ability is also a factor, obviously. And that side of it you perhaps can't control, but being prepared is important, not just if you're a woman. It's for everybody, must be prepared. Do not waste the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you there. That's across the board. So I think, from some of the stuff that you both have said during this discussion, the actual job these days, a lot of the airlines have adjusted their conditions, so there's part-time contracts available. There's a lot of flexibility there for both men and women, but where women might previously have thought if they're going to be the ones with families, and again, you can have the stay-at-home father, obviously, as well as the stay-at-home mother, or however that's managed. But the actual flexibility within the role is very, very much there now. So it's not about doing the job. It's about the whole awareness campaign to make people far more aware of the fact that the opportunity is there. And I had a shocking example not so long ago where I was at a careers event, and I was chatting to a young lady with her mother who wanted to be a pilot. And she'd just come away from a school careers advisor session. And that careers advisor, and we are talking only in the last couple of years, had said, no, you can't be a pilot because you're a woman. And that, well, you can imagine how cross that made me. And I think, what are we going to do about educating the careers advisors, and I'm sorry to all careers advisors that are supporting young ladies into these sorts of careers. Thank you very much for what you're doing, but there's still too few of you who are knowledgeable enough to be able to do that. So what can we do to change that, Marnie?
I think there has definitely been a bit of an issue there, if I'm really honest. I did most of my work focused not just on the end goal of getting pilots into the air industry, but also how do we help charities and schools initiatives that are already set up to educate their teachers to help the children come into the industry. And there is a big issue, and I'm still up against it actually in that area where, you know, they say, well, you know, cabin crew, how are you going to cope with the lifestyle of a pilot? Well, actually it's the same as cabin crew, and you wouldn't even question that, but you do get paid an awful lot. So if you need help at home, then you can get it, or your husband, or you can be the breadwinner because you earn enough money. There's lots of things you can do. So actually educating people who work with children who are offering careers advice is absolutely key. But the biggest question I get asked, and that I do want answered from the industry, and this is where I'm going at the moment, is what is the path for somebody from any background and any minority group to take to get into the airlines? And that is a question that varies and changes depending on what is currently going on in the industry. So if we can get a clear path, we can educate the people who are helping children come in, and then we can dispel some of these myths about, no, you can't be a pilot because you're a woman, or you need to be part of a certain group, or all these factors which actually, quite frankly, unless you talk to the professionals who actually do the job, and very few do, then they won't find out what's actually involved and how suitable it actually is.
Yeah, again, it's back to the research. It's the message in every single session that we've had today. So we're kind of coming to the end of our time now, ladies, and you're both so superbly passionate about this. We've met a few people over the last couple of days, a few men and women, but I'm going to draw the audience's attention to a couple of groups that I want them to watch back on. But whilst I'm doing that, if you can have a think, I want us to finish off with what your wise words would be to young ladies or older ladies who are considering becoming an airline pilot and what they should do next, and also to people who can help educate careers advisors or just the world at large about the opportunity for female pilots. So I'm going to come to you in a second for your answers on that, if you wouldn't mind. But in the meantime, I just want to mention some people that have stood out to me over the last 2 days that we've been talking to. The first two are two young ladies who were in a cadet panel yesterday afternoon that I ran, and we had a young lady from Leading Edge Aviation and from CAE, and both of them talked brilliantly and very, very positively about their experiences through training to date. So if you're concerned about the training, I think you should really watch that session back. And then this morning we had two young ladies, might have been at lunchtime, I've lost track of time, but two young ladies from the British Gliding Association who were so enthusiastic about aviation in general, but also their ultimate career choice of going into the airline itself. So again, watch that session back, and as I think Marnie said, gliding is definitely a way in anyway as well, where you'll find so many ladies and men mixed in there. We should then move on into the aviation world from there. So Georgina, can I come to you first? What is your advice to people watching?
Well, my advice is to encourage them, if they have this feeling about discovering or looking into this world, just go for it. It doesn't matter where you come from or which is your current situation. If you have more or less facilities, if you really want to do it, you start by looking for some information, going to some schools, talking with people who is already in the airline industry. And if you really, really want to do that, and if you try and you like it, just go for it. Just go
for it. Marnie?
Yeah.
I would agree. I would say go for it, but it's all about timing. So I would say at the moment, there's a lot of things happening in the industry. We've got Brexit coming up. We've got with this pandemic to sort out. We've got the jobs to sort out. Once that has happened, if you time your training correctly, then I think you're in a really good position. And I think that I would say research, get yourself in a position where you are financially have a buffer behind you. That's so important. You can do lots of things right now which will help you, actually any kind of work, helping with charities, all these factors build your CV. If you're a really young person, try and do as much at school as you possibly can. Get the grades. You don't have to go to university, you don't have to take that route, so don't be pressurized into that. There is no such thing as a backup plan. I'm really sorry, but in this pandemic, it was quite obvious. It came down to actually those that were flexible of mind, those that were communicating, and those that were prepared to go and do something different. A backup plan, I hear a lot of parents saying about going to university as a backup plan. Actually, you're eating into a lot of your resources, financial resources, if you do that. You don't have to do that. It may be an option that you want to do, and that's great, but you don't have to do it. And what we do find is a lot of my female colleagues actually are very, very qualified. Some research we did, most of them were for academic backgrounds, but you don't have to be. It's really important you recognise that. Also, things like the University Air Squadron or anything like that, you can do. The BWPA, sorry Karen, if I can mention, is another.
No, you can. Great, I was going to ask you to.
British Women's Pilot Association, they're offering scholarships to help people who are already pilots who want to maintain currency, and pilots who are looking to join the industry to get support. You need to just find out and talk to people. The Royal Aeronautical Society, and then last of all, ALTA Mentoring Group, fantastic organisation for women who are already in the industry. And if you're a newly qualified pilot, I would highly recommend you get involved in that through the Royal Aeronautical Society. It's all about research right now. Be patient, it will all come to you. And I'm going to keep driving forward for more minority groups to get into aviation, because we need that balance. So while my colleagues and I are doing that, keep up the pressure at your end and make the sensible and right choices. That's what I would say.
Well, thank you very much. What a great closing line. And I would just add to that, if you have access to people who can, like careers advisors or like head teachers or anybody running any kind of a youth group, and you can encourage them to get people in to talk to that group of young people, then people like Marnie, people like myself, and I'm sure Georgina, we will happily go or find someone to go and come and talk to you, just to educate you and them, so that they in turn can encourage more ladies and more minorities. So generally diversity into the aviation world. So thank you very much to both of you. We'll ask you to come back to the Q&A panel later. There's a couple more questions that have come in last minute. Zoe says thanks for an amazing panel. So that's to you too. Thank you very much indeed. And we're going to close now. And next up is a CV clinic with Tina Konacha. So please do tune in for that, so that you can make sure that your CVs are up to scratch when you apply for ATOs and jobs. Thank you.